So this Instagram, you can now go live with two separate people at the same time. So I thought, how awesome, how cool would it be to have this series, Ordinary People, still have it and go live with somebody else, an ordinary person just like me, just like you, to talk about an ordinary person in the Bible. So the whole series is there's a bunch of people in the Bible that were just ordinary, and God used them for really big, really amazing things. So this whole series is find an ordinary person in the Bible, and let's explore together how God used this ordinary person in big ways. So I'm going to invite tonight on with us, Kate Brooks is going to join us, and she is going to tell us about an ordinary person in the Bible and how God used them in a big way. So I just invited her. Hang tight while she joins us, and let's see what we got here. Hey, there she is. Everybody, like you to welcome Kate Brooks. Kate, how is your day going so far?
Hello, hello. It's going pretty well. Like you guys, I have not had dinner yet, so I'm looking forward to that after this, but otherwise good.
What is your plan for dinner?
I think I might do stuffed shells. Johnny and I had it the other night and it was really good.
Oh, you're going to make it yourself?
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, everybody, welcome Kate onto Ripon Student Live Instagram Live. We're so excited that you can be here, Kate, and we'll just dive in right away with what do you have for us tonight?
Yeah, so Danny and I were talking earlier this week about ordinary people in the Bible, and the first person that came to my mind was Ruth. And so I don't know if you guys have heard of Ruth or not. I see a lot of people saying hi, so hello, thanks for welcoming me.
Mm-hmm.
So Ruth is a super short book. It's in the Old Testament, and she lived a very, very quiet life. And so Danny kind of asked me to talk about, I guess, how God was working in her life as an ordinary person. And so I do have some notes here. If you see me like looking over, I'm just checking them. But the story of Ruth is pretty interesting because she wasn't like Moses, right? Like she wasn't this huge, like popular figure. She wasn't leading the Israelites out of Egypt. She wasn't doing like miracles or showing God's power in like huge miraculous ways. But what happened was in her story, she actually had a husband who died, and her husband's brother also died, and her husband's dad also died, and so her mother-in-law Naomi was pretty much left with just two daughter-in-laws, which was Ruth and then the other one from her other son. And so what happens was Naomi sends Ruth and the other daughter-in-law away. She's like, I'm going back to my hometown, and you guys go off, find new husbands. We'll go our separate ways since, my sons, your husbands have died. Nothing's really tying us together anymore. But Ruth says, I'm not going to go my own way. I'm going to go with you. I'm going to follow you. Where you go, I'll go, and your God will be my God. And so she was very bold, and she was very, I guess it's not like the normal thing people would do, right? Like if you're thinking of a married person and then your husband dies, like normally you wouldn't go still live with your husband's family, I think, especially like in today's day and age. So she was very bold in that way, but basically to sum it up, God worked through her because she ended up meeting a new husband in this new foreign town, and she was working with her hands, and she was working in the fields, and she did very modest work, and she ended up meeting Boaz. And actually what happened was God used Ruth and Boaz to father Obed, who fathered Jesse, who fathered David, King David, the David of the David and Goliath story. So she was an instrumental part in that lineage and leading up to that. But like I said, you wouldn't have necessarily known that because she wasn't this huge historical figure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. So Ruth, we can assume, and then we can actually find this in the first chapter of the book of Matthew, fits into that lineage in between Abraham and David, right?
Yep.
So it's crazy to see how everyone knows who Abraham is, right? And everybody knows who David is. But Ruth here is playing an instrumental role in the lineage of Jesus Christ through sticking with her in-laws, even though her husband passed away.
Yeah, 100%. And it's crazy to think about, like the Bible outlines a lot of those males, like you said, like Abraham and Jesse and all that, but it's like they kind of needed the woman to have David and then to lead to Jesus. And so, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but if my wife passed away, I probably would not. I love my in-laws a ton, but I probably would not move in with them. What do you say, Linz?
100%.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. How does a story like this? How can we apply a story like this to our lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wrote down a couple different things here. I think the verse that came to mind when I was thinking of the story of Ruth earlier today was 1 Thessalonians 4 verses. I think it was verses 11 and 12. It talks about leading a quiet life and minding our own business and working hard with our hands. And so I think that definitely applies to our lives today because Ruth definitely led a quiet life. She didn't have like a showy job. She wasn't really trying to make a lot of money. She was kind of providing for herself and her mother-in-law by gathering old, food and grains from the field. So she was out doing farm work essentially, day in and day out. So she was super hardworking, which we can take, that lesson and apply it today with the work that we're doing. And we can understand that even though some of us don't have like flashy jobs, we can still find purpose and meaning in those jobs and work hard at them. The other thing that I was thinking about is that
Be,
we can learn from Ruth to be very bold and to make these moves and these leaps of faith without, having all of these outside sources. I mean, really, it's just between us and God. If He's telling you to go with her, if He's telling you to pick up your life, leave your family, and move and take this big, giant leap of faith, then we should be confident in our faith and do that and say, yes, God, I'm going to follow you and I'm going to do what you want me to. Um, and I think the other thing to note too is that like God's plan is always bigger than us. And so like Ruth might not have even seen the fruits of her labor, or she might not have seen the fact that she was going to be a great grandparent of David in her lifetime. She lived in a short time period. And so we can see that from the Bible. We can read that she fathered so and so and so and so. But in her lifetime, she might not have known that she was leading to be an ancestor of David and ultimately of Jesus. And so I think that's such a cool lesson we can learn today, is that like in our own little lives, we might be playing a huge part in God's bigger, greater plan that we won't even see in this lifetime. Maybe our children's children's children can see that. So it's super cool.
yeah, that's amazing. So let's rewind back to the first application point where you had said work. When you said that, it reminds me of Colossians 3:23, and students, we talked about this just a couple of weeks ago, where it was like, and all you do, I can't remember exactly. I know Johnny's got it. He's putting it up at his shop, but it's like, whatever you do, work at it as if you're working for the Lord and not for man. And I love this picture of Ruth working her heart out in the fields, just giving it all she's got, even though it's just an ordinary job. And I think it's really important for ourselves and for students as you're growing up and you're trying to decide what you might want to do for work, or you're trying to decide where God is calling you, that no job has any importance to God. So like everything that you should do, you should work at it with all your heart, because it doesn't every job is all the same to God, because we're not called for any specific job other than to make disciples of men, right? So that's a fantastic point. I really love that. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart. It really reminds me of the bathroom remodel that we're doing at our house right now. It gets dirty, it gets messy. I enjoy doing those things sometimes, but sometimes I want to cut corners and just do things the quick and easy way. And that verse reminds me. And so now I can even be reminded of Ruth, that you got to work at everything with all your heart.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's so easy today, like in this society too, to forget that. Like I think the world is like push, 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 go, 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 like get the remodel done as fast as you can, like cut corners. I think it's very against the grain to sit back and be like, okay, God, what do you say about this job I'm doing? What do you want me to learn from this? How can I work with you in this job and show your glory to other people? That takes a lot more effort and intention than to do what you were saying and just kind of go full steam ahead. So, yeah, I think it definitely takes work to have that mindset, but it's definitely worth it in the end.
Yeah, it's a discipline, right?
Yes,
Or
absolutely.
one could say you need to have self control. Yeah, my
Sure.
students know that word, and I'm saying that leading to it intentionally because like
Nice.
maybe like 8 weeks ago we studied a word together. You guys remember what it is? Comment below. We're gonna move on to the next thing. I want to see whoever comments below wins the prize for this week. The Greek word for self control. All right. The next point you had mentioned was to be bold in God. Could you repeat that just a little bit? Refresh me.
Yeah, so I think essentially what I said was that Ruth kind of had two actually main points where she was very bold in her faith and where she decided to step up and go where God was calling her to. The first one was when she decided to leave her family and her hometown and all of her comforts, everything she knew, and go with her mother in law, which was very not average. And then the second thing was she essentially proposed to Boaz, and so she took the initiative to step out in that and trust that he was the person God had for her. And so there were two moments specifically in her book that we can learn from of taking leaps of faith and not second guessing what God is doing in those plans.
Yeah, that's really amazing, and it brings to mind for me several examples in my life where I've made decisions that people have like tried to tell me that's not a great decision. You know, you shouldn't do that, and I really just felt like the Lord was pushing me towards that, and that I ended up going ahead with anyways. I think that is a really strong and common mark of a Christian is the decisions and actions that you make are often counterculture, and you will have many people pushing against the decision, saying that's a bad idea, you shouldn't do that, and to stand strong and bold in where God is leading you. I think honestly, I think that I often give many examples from my life, and maybe the students might be tired of them. Do you have any examples from you yourself and an example of this in your life?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say the biggest thing was like choosing the person to marry for me. I mean, that was a huge, huge decision. And, even today, sometimes I'll be like, man, I wasn't ready for marriage like so young, or we have so many differences, like it's hard to work together and it's hard to get on the same page with things. And so, like, that was a big decision for me of trusting God and being like, okay, God, I felt confirmation after confirmation. I felt a lot of peace from you about this person, which is Johnny, who's on here. And so I'm not going to second guess my emotions and I'm not going to focus on myself. I'm actually going to focus on your bigger plan here and the lives that you can reach through our relationship, which is very hard to do because, it's hard to not focus on yourself and your wants and your needs. And to put that aside and work with somebody else and kind of compromise along the way. So that was probably the biggest example for me.
I love that, and I love that you like specifically touched on your emotions and your own wants and needs. And man, so many times the the things that God calls us to do are way outside of our comfort zone. They don't feel comfortable at all. They might not even feel a need or a want that you have right now. Your emotions are tossed and turned all over the place, and it's so important to be centered on where you truly feel God is calling you to, and not where your emotions are, where your wants or your needs are. So I love that. Because you said getting married, I will say that Lindsay and I felt a lot of the same, and we felt really called to get married really fast. So we actually got engaged, and then married within 5 weeks. And it really, truly was a blessing from God because Lindsay, her grandma, was like her best friend, and her grandma passed away like 2 weeks after we got married. So she was able to be there. And if we had waited like everybody wanted us to, she wouldn't have been there. So huge blessing. God really does bless our bold moves when it's aligned with what He wants for our life.
Yeah, amen. And I actually, you made me think of a quote that I heard one time, which said, like, I think you mentioned God will always call us to things like bigger than ourselves. I heard somebody say once that the reason for that is because we're not relying on our own strength to get through those times. We're actually, in saying yes to something bigger than ourselves, we're relying on God and His strength, and we're forced, or not forced, but we're invited into deeper intimacy with Him and deeper trust in His plan. And so that's so cool that you guys even saw the fruits of that so fast when you got married in like 5 weeks. Of the sense that like God showed you here's why, and this is an example of why trusting me makes sense, and He's faithful and He'll show you the reasons for things. So I love that.
Yeah, definitely. That is a verse actually that I just posted last week, and I think it's a common thing. I just grabbed a Bible here to pull up. I think it's a common thing that like the world says. It's this catchphrase. I don't know where it came from. It's absolutely not true that like God will never give you more than you can handle. And it's just the fact of the matter is the Bible says the exact opposite, and that God gives you more than you can handle so that you turn to Him and rely on Him. And it comes
Exactly.
from Second Corinthians. If you have a comment, go ahead because I'll find it real quick.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've actually talked about that to Johnny recently of like I don't know where that phrase came from, but yeah, I feel like some of those catchphrases come from the Bible and some just sound good, and that's one that just sounds good but it's not true. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Addison, let's see if you got it. You gotta actually type out the word if you think you know it. I believe in you though. um, I don't have the right Bible in front of me. Like obviously every Bible is the right Bible, but it's a weird verse and it's hard to understand, so I'm not gonna say it.
That's good.
And so close. I'm gonna give it to you. Enklatevome was the word, the Greek word for self control or discipline. Enklatevome. Everyone send in clapping hands for Addison. Way to go.
Good job.
Let's just touch on that last takeaway that you had said. Can you repeat that for us?
Let's see. What did I say?
God's plans are bigger than we can even know, even if we don't see it in our lives, right?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So what did you want to touch on with that? Did you have anything specific?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just super humbling to think about that, like, God can be using us for a huge plan that we literally have no idea and will never know until, like, hindsight's always 2020. So we get to see what happened to Ruth and how she played in this bigger picture. And maybe when we pass away, if we believe in Jesus and go to heaven, we'll get to see from 30,000 feet up or whatever. But there are things that God calls us to that we won't realize that is going to happen with our grandkids or our grandkids and things like that. So it was just really humbling to think about and how big, how widespread God's plan for our life is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that kind of came up for me as you were touching on that too is that um we shouldn't hesitate when we ask God or when we feel God asking us to do something just because we don't have all the answers right this second. I think like as humans it's very like normal and it's very comfortable to say yes when we know all the information and we have all the steps laid out in front of us and we can see exactly where we're going and why we're doing it. But I think that's where faith comes in. I think faith is, very important when it comes to allowing God to paint that bigger picture in our lives, because we're not always going to have the answers and we're not always going to have the why when we start. But starting anyway requires us to focus on God and be close to Him and just understand that, like, He's going to show you the way. Like, He might not give you every single step at the beginning, but He will guide you and He will give you direction along the way. So I think faith and trust in Him is a big part of even being able to be part of that bigger picture. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone send in the clapping hands for Kate. I really appreciate you. Guys, next week, we're doing the same thing. Tasha is going to join us, and I'm Natasha. I'm so excited. She's got something planned that she's been working on for a while because she knew this was coming. Kate whipped this together in a heartbeat. So thank you so much, Kate. Guys, I'm going to be posting this to YouTube. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. Each week I try to post what we talk to on YouTube, talk about on YouTube. And then I'm also going to post an update tomorrow just of the announcements that I missed. And if you weren't on earlier, I just want to remind you guys that we are canceling our summer camps, the one to Colorado and Expeditions Unlimited. We will certainly plan something whenever we can get back together. It's going to be super awesome. I got a lot of ideas stirring to figure that out. And yeah, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week.